It wasn't the lipstick on his collar or the late-night meetings that gave him away. It was a hidden phone, a device I wasn't meant to find, filled with secrets I wasn't meant to know. As I unlocked it, my world unraveled in ways I couldn't have imagined. But this isn't just a story of betrayal, it's about how far one person can go when love becomes a weapon and loyalty becomes a lie. I used to believe that my marriage was unshakable. After 12 years together, 3 moves across the country, and countless shared dreams, I thought we had something rare. My husband, Marcus, was the kind of man who always seemed to have everything under control. His career, his charm, his ability to make me feel like the center of his universe. But over the past few months, something had shifted. At first, it was small things, a forgotten anniversary dinner, his sudden obsession with working late, the way he would guard his phone like it held state secrets. I told myself it was just the stress of his new promotion. I ignored the pit in my stomach, the nagging doubts that whispered in the back of my mind. Until the day I found the second phone. It was a rainy Saturday afternoon when it happened. Marcus had left for his usual gym session, and I was cleaning out the storage closet in our bedroom. Amid the piles of old paperwork and forgotten gadgets, I found a sleek black phone tucked inside an old shoebox. I froze, staring at the device. Marcus wasn't the type to lose or misplace things, and I knew for a fact this wasn't his work phone or personal one. My hands trembled as I powered it on. The screen lit up, revealing a string of messages from a contact saved as Lila. The conversation was recent, intimate, and unmistakably incriminating. "I miss you already. Last night was perfect. I'll call when she's asleep. Be patient." The blood drained from my face as I scrolled through the messages. Photos, videos, plans for future rendezvous. They were all there, each one a knife to the heart. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just evidence of an affair, it was a window into a life I didn't recognize. Marcus wasn't just cheating, he was living a double life, sharing pieces of himself with this woman that I thought were reserved for me. I threw the phone onto the bed, my hands shaking. My mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? Who was this woman? And why had he hidden it so poorly, almost as if he wanted me to find it? I paced the room, trying to make sense of it all. Part of me wanted to call him immediately, to confront him with the evidence and demand answers. But another part of me, the part that had always been patient, methodical, knew that this required more than anger. This required a plan. By the time Marcus returned home that evening, I had calmed myself enough to act normal. He walked through the door with his usual charm, kissed me on the cheek, and asked about dinner like nothing was wrong. "Just leftovers," I said, forcing a smile. He didn't notice the strain in my voice, the way my hands shook as I poured a glass of wine. I watched him carefully, looking for any sign of guilt or hesitation. But Marcus was as polished as ever, his mask firmly in place. That night, as he slept soundly beside me, I slipped out of bed and retrieved the phone. If Marcus wanted to hide things from me, I would make sure I knew every secret he was trying to keep. The next day, while Marcus was at work, I began my investigation. The messages on the phone revealed more than just an affair. They revealed a pattern of lies and manipulation. Lila wasn't just a fling. She was someone Marcus had been seeing for over a year. Someone he had taken on trips, introduced to friends I didn't know, and even spent money on that I thought was going toward our future. But the deeper I dug, the more disturbing the picture became. Lila wasn't just complicit in the affair, she was actively encouraging it. "She'll never find out," one message read. "You deserve better than a boring wife who doesn't understand you." I clenched my fists, my anger bubbling to the surface. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a calculated effort to erase me from my own marriage. That evening, I couldn't hide my emotions any longer. As Marcus sat across from me at the dinner table, scrolling through his phone, I slammed the second phone onto the table. His face went pale, his fork clattering onto his plate. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice low and controlled. Does it matter? I said, my voice trembling with rage. How long has this been going on, Marcus? How long have you been lying to me? He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The polished, confident man I had married was suddenly at a loss, his carefully constructed world crumbling before my eyes. I trusted you, I said, my voice breaking. I built my life around you. And this is what you've been doing? Sneaking around with some woman behind my back? I can explain, he said finally, his voice shaking. Explain, I repeated, my laughter bitter. Go ahead, explain how you've been cheating on me for over a year. Explain how you've been lying to my face while building a life with someone else. But before he could answer, I realized something. This wasn't just about Marcus and Lila. There was something bigger, something I hadn't yet uncovered, and I was going to find out exactly what it was. As I stared at Marcus, waiting for his explanation, I realized something chilling. This wasn't just a garden variety affair. The phone, the hidden money, the carefully orchestrated deceit. It all pointed to something bigger. His silence told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't going to tell the truth. If I wanted answers, I'd have to get them myself. I'm not doing this with you, I said, standing up and walking toward the bedroom. Marcus followed, his voice frantic now. Wait, please just listen to me, he said, grabbing my arm. I can explain everything. Then explain, I said, yanking my arm free. But if you lie to me again, I swear, Marcus, I'm done. He sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. Lila was a mistake, he said finally. It started when I was traveling for work. It wasn't supposed to mean anything, but I got caught up. She was different. Different. The words sent a wave of anger through me. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. Different how? I asked. He hesitated, his eyes avoiding mine. She made me feel important, he said quietly, like I wasn't just a paycheck or a husband, like I mattered. And I don't make you feel that way, I shot back. It's not about you, he said quickly. It's about me. I was feeling lost, and Lila was there. His words were pathetic, a weak attempt to justify months, no years, of betrayal. But as much as I hated him in that moment, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more he wasn't saying. The next day, while Marcus was at work, I decided to dig deeper. If he wasn't going to give me the full story, I'd find it myself. I started with our bank accounts. For years, Marcus had handled most of our finances, and I had trusted him completely. But as I went through our statements, I noticed something alarming. Large withdrawals from a joint account, often in cash, over the past several months. The amounts were staggering, thousands of dollars gone without explanation, and they coincided with the dates of Marcus's work trips. But that wasn't all. I also found payments to a private PO box, as well as transfers to an account under Lila's name. This wasn't just an affair, it was a full-blown financial betrayal. I took the information to a friend of mine, Sarah, who worked in accounting. Together, we traced the transactions back to a series of shell companies tied to Marcus's name. What the hell is this? I asked, staring at the documents in disbelief. Sarah frowned, her fingers flying across her keyboard. It looks like he's been funneling money into offshore accounts, she said. But why would he do that? I shook my head, my mind racing. I don't know. Maybe he's hiding it from me, or maybe... The thought hit me like a ton of bricks. Maybe he's hiding it from someone else. The phone buzzed on the counter, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was Marcus's secret phone, and the text was from Lila. We need to talk. Things are getting messy. Messy? What did that mean? Against my better judgment, I decided to respond. I typed a short reply. Meet me at the park, 7 p.m. and hit send. If Marcus and Lila thought they could keep me in the dark, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. At 7 p.m, I arrived at the park, my heart pounding. Lila was already there, sitting on a bench and looking around nervously. She was younger than I expected, with carefully styled hair and designer clothes that screamed kept woman. When she saw me, her eyes widened. "You're not Marcus," she said, her voice shaking. "No," I said, sitting down beside her. "I'm his wife." She tried to stand, but I grabbed her wrist. "You're not going anywhere until you tell me the truth," I said, my voice low but firm. Lila hesitated, her eyes darting around as if searching for an escape. Finally, she sighed and sat back down. "What do you want to know?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "How long has this been going on?" "A little over a year," she admitted. "But it's not what you think." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh? Enlighten me." She hesitated, then said, "Marcus isn't just cheating on you. He's running from someone." Her words sent a chill down my spine. "What do you mean, running?" Lila glanced around nervously, then leaned in closer. "He owes people money, dangerous people, the cash withdrawals, the offshore accounts. It's all part of his plan to pay them off before they come after him. And me." My stomach churned. This wasn't just about an affair. Marcus had dragged me into something far darker than I could have imagined. "Who are these people?" I demanded. "I don't know," Lila admitted, "but they're serious. Marcus told me they'd hurt us, if he didn't pay up. That's why he's been so desperate. He's been trying to keep you in the dark, to protect you." I laughed bitterly. "Protect me? By lying to me? By funneling money into secret accounts and sleeping with you on the side?" Lila didn't respond, her eyes downcast. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The money, the lies, the secrecy. It wasn't just about Marcus's selfishness. It was about survival. But if Marcus thought he could fix this on his own, he was wrong. As I walked away from the park that evening, my mind raced with possibilities. Marcus had put our entire family at risk, and I couldn't trust him to clean up his own mess. If he wasn't going to protect us, I'd have to do it myself. I didn't know who these people were or what they wanted, but one thing was clear: I needed to find them before they found us. Lila's revelation left me reeling. Marcus wasn't just a liar and a cheater, he was a man drowning in debts to people who could destroy everything we held dear. The affair, the secret accounts, the hidden phone, it was all part of a much darker web than I'd imagined. But one thing was clear: if Marcus had dragged me into this mess, I was going to fight my way out, no matter what it took. That night, I waited for Marcus to come home. When he finally walked through the door, he looked exhausted, his usual confidence replaced by something I hadn't seen before: fear. "We need to talk," I said, standing in the living room with my arms crossed. He sighed, setting his bag down. "Not tonight, Claire. I've had a long day." "No," I snapped, stepping closer to him. "You don't get to brush this off. I met Lila." His head snapped up, his eyes wide with panic. "You... what?" "I know about the money," I continued, my voice steady. "I know about the offshore accounts, the withdrawals, and the people you owe. What I don't know is why you thought you could keep this from me." Marcus sat down heavily on the couch, his hands running through his hair. "It's complicated," he said finally. "Then uncomplicate it," I shot back. "Who are these people, Marcus? What have you done?" He looked up at me, his face pale. "It started 2 years ago," he said quietly. "I got involved with a group of investors, at least that's what they called themselves. They promised quick returns, no questions asked. At first, everything was fine. The money rolled in and I thought I'd found the perfect side hustle. "But," I prompted, my arms still crossed. "But it wasn't legit," he admitted. "I didn't know at first, but when I tried to pull out, they wouldn't let me. They said I owed them for the money I'd made, and when I couldn't pay it back..." He trailed off, his eyes dropping to the floor. "What did they do, Marcus?" I demanded. "They threatened me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. They said they'd come after me, after you, after the kids. I panicked. I thought if I could just buy some time, I could fix it. That's why I started moving the money around. And that's when I met Lila." My stomach churned as I listened to his confession. This wasn't just about a bad decision. This was about survival. Marcus had put our family in danger, and now we were all paying the price. "Who are these people?" I asked again, my voice firm. He hesitated, then said, "They call themselves the Meridian Group. They're not just some loan sharks. They're connected, powerful. They don't just want their money back, they want control." "Control of what?" "Everything," he said grimly. "My business, my life, our family. They don't care. They'll take whatever they can get." I took a deep breath, my mind racing. If the Meridian Group was as dangerous as Marcus claimed, then waiting for them to make the next move wasn't an option. "We need to go to the police," I said. "No," Marcus said quickly, shaking his head. "You don't understand. If we go to the cops, they'll find out. They have people everywhere, lawyers, cops, judges. If they think I'm turning on them, they'll kill us all." "Then what do you suggest?" I snapped. He didn't have an answer. If Marcus was too scared to fight back, then I'd have to do it myself. The next morning, while he was at work, I made a call to an old friend of mine, Eleanor, who worked as a private investigator. Eleanor had always been resourceful, and I trusted her more than anyone else. "I need your help," I said, explaining the situation. "Sounds messy," she said after I finished. "But if these people are as connected as you say, this isn't going to be easy. Are you sure you want to do this?" "I don't have a choice," I said. "They've already taken too much. I need to know who they are and how to stop them." Eleanor got to work immediately, using her network to dig into the Meridian Group. Within days, she had uncovered enough to confirm Marcus's fears. "They're not just loan sharks," she told me during our second meeting. "They're a front for a massive criminal organization. Drugs, money laundering, real estate fraud, you name it, they're involved." I felt a chill run down my spine. "And Marcus is tied to all of this." "Not directly," she said, "but they've been using him as a pawn. The money he's been funneling isn't just repayment, it's part of their laundering scheme. If he keeps going, he's going to take the fall for everything." I clenched my fists, my anger boiling over. Marcus hadn't just endangered himself, he had made himself the perfect scapegoat for a group of criminals who wouldn't think twice about destroying him. Eleanor and I devised a plan to gather more evidence on the Meridian Group. If we could expose their operations, we might be able to cut them off at the source. But doing so would require bait, and that meant using Marcus as the key to their downfall. When I told Marcus about the plan, he was hesitant. "This is insane," he said. "If they find out, they'll kill me." "They're going to destroy you anyway," I said bluntly. "At least this way, you have a chance to fight back." He looked at me, his fear evident. "And what about you? What happens if they find out you're involved?" "I'm already involved," I said. "You made sure of that the moment you lied to me." The plan was simple but dangerous. Marcus would meet with one of the Meridian Group's enforcers to discuss his debt. Eleanor and I would be nearby, recording the conversation and gathering as much evidence as we could. The meeting was set for a dimly lit warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a place that screamed danger. As Marcus walked inside, my heart pounded in my chest. From the shadows, Eleanor and I watched as Marcus greeted a man I didn't recognize. Tall, broad-shouldered, and exuding a quiet menace. "Do you have the money?" the man asked, his voice low and threatening. Marcus stammered, I need more time." The man's expression darkened. "Time's up, Marcus. You know what happens when people cross us." As the man reached into his jacket, Eleanor nudged me, signaling that we had enough evidence. But before we could act, something shocking happened. Another man stepped out of the shadows, someone I recognized immediately. It was Lila. Only she wasn't the scared, desperate woman I had met at the park. She was calm, confident, and clearly in charge. "Well, well," she said, smirking at Marcus. "Looks like the game's up." The revelation from Lila had flipped everything on its head. This wasn't just a betrayal of love, it was a betrayal of trust, safety, and stability. Marcus hadn't just been unfaithful, he had led our family into a storm of danger. And now, it was my responsibility to find the truth and protect what little was left of my life. I had always thought of myself as someone who could handle adversity, but as I sat in the quiet of our bedroom that night, staring at the secret phone and the financial documents strewn across the bed, I realized that this was more than adversity. This was war. The next morning, while Marcus was at work, I began my investigation. I went through his laptop, his emails, even his desk drawers, searching for any clue that might reveal the identities of these dangerous people Lila had mentioned. What I found was chilling. A string of cryptic emails between Marcus and someone named Raven. The messages were brief, filled with coded language, but one thing was clear: they were about money. A document detailing a series of loan agreements with interest rates so high they bordered on criminal. A list of names, most of which meant nothing to me except for one: Gareth Blackwell. Gareth Blackwell was a name I had heard before. He was a notorious businessman with a reputation for predatory lending and shady deals. Rumors of his involvement in organized crime were rampant, but no one had ever been able to prove anything. My hands shook as I stared at the name. Marcus had gotten tangled up with Gareth Blackwell, and now we were all paying the price. When Marcus came home that evening, I was waiting for him. The documents were laid out on the coffee table, and the secret phone sat in the middle like a damning piece of evidence. "What is this?" I asked, my voice cold. Marcus froze, his face pale. "Where did you get that?" "Does it matter?" I snapped. "You've been lying to me for months, hiding this from me. Do you have any idea what you've done to us?" "I was trying to protect you," he said weakly, sitting down across from me. "Protect me," I said, my voice rising. "You've been lying, cheating, and funneling money to a criminal. How is that protecting me?" He buried his face in his hands. "I didn't have a choice," he said, his voice muffled. "I owed Gareth money, a lot of money. If I didn't pay him back, he was going to come after me, after us." Over the next hour, Marcus unraveled the story. He had borrowed money from Gareth Blackwell 2 years ago to cover a failed investment. At first, he thought he could pay it back, but the interest rates were so high that he quickly fell behind. Desperate to keep up, he started withdrawing money from our accounts, lying about work trips, and even taking on shady side deals. Lila had been part of the deception. Marcus had convinced her to pose as his lover to keep Gareth distracted, but their arrangement had quickly turned into something more. "You were supposed to be a team with me," I said, my voice trembling. "Instead, you brought her into our life. You let her help you destroy everything we built." "I know," Marcus said, tears streaming down his face. "I know I've messed up, but I was trying to fix it." "Well, you didn't fix it," I said coldly. "You made it worse, and now I'm going to fix it." That night, I reached out to an old friend, Julian, who worked in private security. Julian was the kind of person who knew how to navigate dangerous situations, and I trusted him implicitly. When I told him about Gareth Blackwell, Julian's face darkened. "You're playing with fire," he said. "Gareth isn't just a criminal, he's ruthless. If Marcus owes him money, you need to tread carefully." "I don't have a choice," I said. "If we don't deal with this now, Gareth will destroy us." Julian nodded, his expression grim. "Then we need to find leverage, something that will make Gareth back off." Together, we began digging into Gareth's operations, searching for anything that could give us an edge. What we found was both terrifying and promising. Gareth wasn't just running a predatory lending scheme, he was laundering money for a much larger criminal organization. Using the information we had gathered, Julian arranged a meeting with Gareth. It was risky, but it was the only way to confront him directly and negotiate a way out. The meeting took place in a dimly lit warehouse on the outskirts of town. Gareth was exactly what I had expected. Tall, intimidating, and exuding an aura of power. His henchmen flanked him on either side, their eyes cold and watchful. "You must be Marcus's wife," Gareth said, his voice smooth but menacing. "I've heard so much about you." I forced myself to stay calm. "I'm here to make a deal," I said, my voice steady. Gareth raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "A deal? And what makes you think you're in any position to negotiate?" I slid a folder across the table. "Because I have this." Inside the folder were documents detailing Gareth's laundering activities, along with names and transactions that tied him to some very dangerous people. Gareth's expression darkened as he flipped through the pages. "Where did you get this?" he demanded. "Doesn't matter," I said. "What matters is that if anything happens to me or my family, this goes straight to the authorities." Gareth leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing as he studied me. "You've got guts," he said finally. "I'll give you that." "So, do we have a deal?" I asked. He smirked. "For now, but don't think this is over." As I walked out of the warehouse, my heart pounding, I knew that Gareth's threat wasn't empty. He wasn't the kind of man who let things go. But for now, I had bought us some time, and I was determined to use it to ensure that Gareth Blackwell never had the chance to come after us again. Walking out of Gareth Blackwell's warehouse that night, I felt an unsettling mix of triumph and terror. I had stood toe-to-toe with one of the most dangerous men in the city and walked away with my family intact, for now. But Gareth's parting words haunted me. "Don't think this is over." He wasn't the kind of man to let threats or challenges slide. If I wanted to protect my family for good, I needed to take action, real, definitive action, to dismantle his grip on our lives. Back at home, Marcus was pacing nervously in the living room when I walked in. He stopped mid-step, his face a mix of relief and fear. "You're back," he said, his voice trembling. "What happened?" I dropped my bag onto the couch and stared at him. "I bought us time," I said flatly. "But that's all it is, time. Gareth's not going to forget this, Marcus. And if we don't act, he'll come after us again." Marcus sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "What do we do?" "You mean, what do I do?" I shot back. "Because let's be clear, Marcus, you've done nothing but lie and dig us deeper into this mess. From now on, I'm in charge." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with shame. "You're right, just tell me what you need me to do." I wasn't sure if I could trust him anymore, but for now, I needed all the help I could get. The next day, I met with Julian to discuss our next move. "We've got leverage on Gareth," I said, "but we need to take it further. If we can expose his entire operation, we might be able to take him down for good." Julian nodded, his expression grim. "It's risky. Gareth's got connections everywhere. Law enforcement, politicians, you name it. If we're going to expose him, we need to make sure the evidence is ironclad." Together, we devised a plan to infiltrate Gareth's network. Julian had contacts who could help us gather more information, people who had worked with Gareth in the past and were willing to talk in exchange for protection. But even as we laid out the details, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running out of time. Surprisingly, Marcus began to step up. He contacted a former colleague who had once worked in forensic accounting and asked for help tracing Gareth's financial activities. While I still didn't fully trust Marcus, I could see he was trying to make amends. "I know I screwed up," he said one night as we worked late into the evening, "but I'll do whatever it takes to fix this, for you, for us." His words were sincere, but I wasn't ready to forgive him. Not yet. "This isn't about us," I said. "This is about survival. If we don't stop Gareth, there won't be anything left to fix." After weeks of digging, we finally found what we needed: a paper trail that linked Gareth to high-profile money laundering operations, as well as ties to organized crime syndicates. It was the kind of evidence that couldn't be ignored, even by those on Gareth's payroll. But there was a catch. To make the evidence stick, we needed a whistleblower, someone from Gareth's inner circle who could testify against him. Julian had a contact in mind, a man named Victor, who had once been Gareth's right-hand man but had fallen out of favour. According to Julian, Victor was bitter and desperate, the perfect candidate to help us. We met Victor in a rundown diner on the outskirts of the city. He was a wiry man in his late 40s with sharp eyes that darted nervously around the room. "You're playing a dangerous game," he said as he slid into the booth. "Gareth doesn't take kindly to betrayal." "Neither do I said, leaning forward. "But this isn't about betrayal, it's about justice. Gareth's hurt too many people for too long. It's time to stop him." Victor hesitated, his fingers drumming against the table. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. Gareth's got eyes everywhere. If he finds out I'm talking to you—" "He won't," Julian said firmly. "We'll protect you, but we need your help. You know how his operation works. You know where the bodies are buried." Victor's eyes flicked to me. "Why are you doing this? You could just walk away, let Gareth have what he wants." "Because he won't stop," I said. "Not until he's destroyed everything I care about, and I'm not going to let that happen." After a long pause, Victor nodded. "Okay, I'll help you, but if this goes south, we're all dead." With Victor's help, we set a trap for Gareth. Using Victor as bait, we arranged a fake meeting with Gareth's associates, promising them a lucrative new deal. The goal was to lure Gareth into a situation where he would incriminate himself on record. It was a risky plan, but it was our best shot at taking him down. As the date of the meeting approached, the tension was palpable. Julian and his team had secured the location, wiring it with cameras and microphones to capture every detail. I was in the control room, monitoring the feed and praying that everything would go smoothly. The night of the meeting, Gareth arrived at the location, his usual smug confidence on full display. Victor played his part perfectly, presenting the fake deal as an opportunity too good to pass up. But as the conversation progressed, Gareth began to get suspicious. "This doesn't feel right," he said, his eyes narrowing. "Relax," Victor said, his voice steady. "It's all legit. Just sign the paperwork and we're good to go." Gareth hesitated, then reached for the pen. That's when Julian's team moved in, armed with warrants and a mountain of evidence. The look on Gareth's face as he was handcuffed was one I'd never forget. For the first time, the man who had terrorized so many looked genuinely afraid. With Gareth in custody and his operation exposed, I finally felt like I could breathe again. It wasn't a perfect victory. There were still scars from Marcus's betrayal, and the damage to our family would take years to heal. But for the first time in months, I felt like we had a chance. As I stood in the aftermath of it all, I realized something. I wasn't just fighting for my family, I was fighting for myself. And while the battle had left me bruised, it had also made me stronger than I ever thought possible. For the first time in months, life began to feel normal again. With Gareth Blackwell behind bars and his empire crumbling, the immediate danger seemed to have passed. Marcus and I no longer lived in fear of ominous phone calls or shadowy figures watching from the distance. But peace, I've learned, is rarely what it seems. While Marcus worked to regain my trust and rebuild our lives, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. There was a loose end I couldn't ignore. The letter Gareth had slipped me during his arrest. "You've won this round, but I'm not the only one you should be worried about." It wasn't just a threat, it was a promise, and I couldn't help but wonder what Gareth meant. The days following Gareth's arrest were filled with headlines and legal proceedings. Journalists swarmed our neighborhood, desperate for quotes about the notorious crime boss's downfall. Julian had assured me that our role in exposing Gareth had been kept confidential, but that didn't mean we were safe. One morning, as I scrolled through news articles, a headline caught my eye. Blackwell's alleged successor emerges in criminal underworld. The article claimed that Gareth's arrest had created a power vacuum, and someone new was stepping in to take his place. The name mentioned sent a chill down my spine. Raven. Raven. The name from Marcus's emails. I couldn't ignore the connection. Raven wasn't just another player in Gareth's operation, they were deeply embedded in it, someone Marcus had been communicating with for months. Confronting Marcus was no longer a choice, it was a necessity. That evening, as he sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone, I dropped the news article in front of him. "Care to explain this?" Marcus looked up, his face paling as he read the headline. "I don't know anything about this," he said quickly, but his eyes betrayed him. "Don't lie to me," I snapped. "You've been emailing someone named Raven. You've been hiding things from me for months. If there's something you're not telling me, now's the time." Marcus sighed, rubbing his temples. "Raven isn't who you think they are," he said finally. "Then who are they?" I demanded. He hesitated, then said, "Raven is Gareth's sister." The revelation hit me like a freight train. Gareth's sister had been involved in his operation all along, and Marcus had known about it. "She handles the finances," Marcus explained, his voice shaky. "She was the one I dealt with when I borrowed the money, but I swear I didn't know she was this powerful. I thought she was just another cog in the machine. Do you realize what you've done?" I said, my voice trembling with rage. "You've put us in the crosshairs of someone even more dangerous than Gareth." Marcus buried his face in his hands. "I didn't know," he said weakly. "You never know," I shot back. "That's the problem. You keep making these reckless decisions, and we're the ones who pay for them." The next day, a black SUV pulled into our driveway. My stomach dropped as I watched a tall, imposing woman step out, her sharp suit and cold demeanor making her presence even more intimidating. It was Raven. I opened the door before she could knock, forcing myself to appear calm. "Can I help you?" I asked. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You must be the woman who took my brother down," she said, her tone icy. "I think it's time we talked." We sat in the living room, the tension so thick it was suffocating. Raven's eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail as if committing it to memory. "You've caused quite a mess," she said, crossing her legs elegantly. "Gareth wasn't perfect, but he kept things running smoothly. Now everything's chaotic." "I'm not responsible for his choices," I said, keeping my voice steady. "He made his bed, and now he has to lie in it." Raven chuckled softly. "You're bold, I'll give you that. But let me be clear, Gareth's downfall has created problems for people far more powerful than you can imagine. Problems that won't just go away because you think you've won." "What do you want?" I asked, cutting to the chase. "I want balance," she said simply, "and you're going to help me restore it." Raven's proposal was as audacious as it was chilling. She wanted me to use the evidence we had against Gareth to implicate someone else, one of his rivals in the criminal underworld. "If you do this," she said, "I'll make sure your family is left alone, but if you refuse—" Her words hung in the air like a threat. "I'm not getting involved in your games," I said firmly. She smiled again, her eyes narrowing. "You already are, whether you like it or not. The only question is how much damage you're willing to let happen before you play along." After Raven left, I felt the walls closing in. Her ultimatum was clear: cooperate or face the consequences. But doing what she asked would mean becoming a pawn in her game, just like Marcus had been with Gareth. I couldn't let that happen. Julian urged caution. "Raven isn't bluffing," he said. "She's as ruthless as her brother, maybe more. If you don't give her what she wants, she'll come after you." "Then we'll take her down too," I said, my resolve hardening. "She thinks she can intimidate me, but she has no idea who she's dealing with." Instead of giving Raven what she wanted, I decided to expose her. Using the evidence we had gathered on Gareth, I worked with Julian to build a case against her. It wasn't easy, Raven was careful, her tracks well covered, but everyone made mistakes. And when we found hers, we pounced. Raven was a strategist. Every move she made was calculated, her threats precise, and her presence overwhelming. She wasn't just Gareth's sister, she was the hidden force behind his empire, and taking her down would require more than evidence. It would require cunning and boldness. I couldn't just expose her like I had Gareth. She had too many layers of protection, too many people in her pocket. If we were going to dismantle her operation, we had to make her think she was still in control. The only way to defeat Raven was to play her game and outmaneuver her. Julian and I worked tirelessly to trace Raven's activities. Unlike Gareth, who was brash and left a trail of recklessness, Raven was meticulous. Her network was decentralized, with layers of intermediaries shielding her from direct involvement. But everyone had a weak link. Through Victor, Gareth's former associate, we identified a man named Charles Vance, a mid-level operative in Raven's organization. Vance was ambitious, desperate for power, and reckless enough to make mistakes. "He's our way in," Julian said, laying out the plan. "If we can flip him, we can unravel the entire operation." I nodded, though the thought of confronting another one of Raven's allies sent chills down my spine. "Let's do it." Julian arranged a meeting with Vance at a secluded bar on the outskirts of town. The atmosphere was tense as we waited for him to arrive. When he finally walked in, his nervous energy was palpable. "Why am I here?" Vance asked, his eyes darting between Julian and me. "Because you're in a sinking ship," I said, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were documents connecting him to several illegal activities. "And you have two choices. Help us take Raven down or go down with her." Vance's face turned pale as he flipped through the papers. "You don't know what you're asking," he said, his voice trembling. "If Raven finds out I talked to you, I'm dead." "She doesn't have to find out," Julian said calmly. "All you need to do is give us the information we need. After that, we'll make sure you're protected." Vance hesitated, his fear evident, but eventually he nodded. "Okay, what do you need?" Through Vance, we uncovered critical details about Raven's operation. She wasn't just running Gareth's old empire, she had expanded it, creating a sprawling network of money laundering, extortion, and political bribery. The most shocking revelation, however, was her ultimate goal: to destabilize Gareth's former rivals and consolidate power in the criminal underworld. She wasn't just taking over, she was building an empire. Armed with this information, Julian and I began working with a trusted contact in law enforcement, a detective named Eleanor Ramirez. Eleanor had been investigating organized crime for years and was eager to bring Raven to justice. "This is the break we've been waiting for," Eleanor said as she reviewed the evidence. "But it won't be easy. Raven's influence runs deep and she won't go down without a fight." The plan was simple in theory, but dangerous in execution. Using Vance as bait, we would lure Raven to a meeting under the guise of a high-stakes deal. The location would be wired with surveillance equipment, and Eleanor's team would be on standby to make the arrest. But there was one catch. Raven couldn't suspect anything. If she even sniffed a trap, she would disappear, and we'd lose our chance to take her down. As the day of the meeting approached, the tension was almost unbearable. I couldn't shake the feeling that Raven was always one step ahead, watching and waiting for us to slip up. The meeting was set for a private warehouse late at night. I watched from a nearby control room as Raven arrived, her sharp suit and calm demeanor exuding confidence. Vance played his part perfectly, presenting the fake deal as an opportunity to expand her operations. But as the conversation progressed, Raven's eyes narrowed. "This feels off," she said, her voice cold. Vance stammered, trying to reassure her, but Raven's instincts were sharp. "You've never been this bold before," she said, leaning closer to him. "What changed?" My heart raced as I watched the scene unfold. If Raven walked out now, everything would fall apart. Before Raven could leave, Eleanor's team stormed in, guns drawn. Raven's henchmen tried to fight, but they were quickly subdued. As Raven was handcuffed, she turned to the cameras, her face calm, but her eyes burning with fury. "This isn't over," she said, her voice steady. "You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've started." Her words sent a chill down my spine. Even in defeat, she radiated power and control. With Raven in custody, her operation began to unravel. Her allies abandoned her, her finances were seized, and her reputation was destroyed. But as I sat in the quiet of my home that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was right. This wasn't over. Raven had been the most dangerous opponent I had ever faced, and I knew she wouldn't stay down for long. For weeks after Raven's arrest, life felt surreal. The news was everywhere. The Blackwell empire falls. Authorities take down notorious crime boss. A family's fight against organized crime. The public celebrated Raven's downfall as a victory against corruption and crime, but I couldn't share their relief. Deep inside, her parting words haunted me. "You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've started." I should have felt triumphant, but instead I felt like a mouse in a maze, unsure if the exit led to freedom or another trap. Marcus tried to move on, throwing himself into his work and our family. He acted like everything was finally over, but I could see the cracks in his facade. He avoided certain conversations, flinched when his phone buzzed, and seemed more anxious than ever. One night, I couldn't hold back any longer. "What's going on, Marcus?" I asked as we sat at the dinner table. He avoided my gaze. "Nothing, I'm just tired." "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice firm. "After everything we've been through, I deserve the truth. What aren't you telling me?" Marcus sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. "It's Raven," he admitted. "Even from jail, she's making threats. Her network is still out there, and they're not happy about what happened." My stomach dropped. "What kind of threats?" "She has people watching us," Marcus said quietly. "She made it clear that if I don't keep my mouth shut, there will be consequences." The next day, I began to notice things I hadn't before. A car parked across the street for hours, strangers lingering near the house, calls from unknown numbers that hung up when I answered. Julian confirmed my suspicions. "Raven's network hasn't been dismantled entirely," he said. "She may be in custody, but her people are still active. They're likely trying to intimidate you into silence, or worse." The realization sent a chill down my spine. I had thought the fight was over, but Raven's reach extended far beyond her prison walls. That evening, as I sorted through some of Marcus's paperwork, I stumbled upon something that made my heart stop. A series of recent transactions from an account I didn't recognize. The payments were large, frequent, and untraceable, except for one note attached to a transfer, for Raven's protection. My hands shook as I confronted Marcus. "What is this?" I demanded, holding the printouts in front of him. He froze, his face pale. "It's not what you think," he said quickly. "Then tell me what it is," I said, my voice trembling with anger, "because it looks like you've been sending money to Raven." "I had to," he said, his voice cracking. "She threatened to come after us. She said if I didn't help her, she'd make our lives a living hell." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So after everything she's done, you're still helping her? You're still letting her control you?" "I didn't have a choice," Marcus shouted. "You don't understand what she's capable of." "No," I said coldly. "You don't understand what you've done. You've betrayed me all over again, and this time you've put all of us in even more danger." I packed a bag that night and left with our daughter Sophia. I couldn't stay in a house where Marcus's decisions continued to endanger us. "You're making a mistake," Marcus said as I walked out the door. "No," I said, turning to face him one last time. "The mistake was trusting you." Julian helped me relocate to a safe house while we figured out our next steps. I felt a strange mix of grief and relief as I settled into the small, nondescript home. Eleanor, the detective who had helped with Raven's arrest, visited me soon after. "I know this has been overwhelming," she said gently, but we're close to dismantling Raven's network. We just need one more thing to secure her conviction." "What's that?" I asked warily. "Testimony from Marcus," she said. "He's the only one who can confirm certain transactions and communications. Without him, Raven might have a chance to appeal." My chest tightened. "You can't rely on him," I said bitterly. "He's already compromised." Eleanor's expression softened. "We'll keep him protected, but we need you to convince him to cooperate." I returned to the house to speak with Marcus, though every step toward the door felt like a betrayal of my own principles. When he opened the door, he looked exhausted, as if the weight of his decisions had finally caught up to him. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "I didn't come for you," I said bluntly. "I came because you're the only one who can put an end to this." I explained Eleanor's request, watching as Marcus's face twisted with guilt and fear. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "If I testify, they'll come after me, after you, after Sophia." "They're already coming after us," I said. "The only way to stop this is to stand up to them. If you don't, Raven will win and we'll never be safe." After a long silence, Marcus nodded. "Okay," he said. "I'll do it." For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. If Marcus followed through, if he testified against Raven, we might finally have a chance to break free from her grip. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into something far more dangerous than we realized. The courthouse was a fortress that day, with armed guards stationed at every entrance. Marcus and I walked inside, flanked by officers and Elena, the detective who had been our anchor throughout this nightmare. Marcus's testimony was the keystone in the case against Raven, and everyone knew the stakes were high. The air inside the courtroom was electric, filled with tension and an undercurrent of fear. The gallery was sparse, but every person there seemed to radiate unease. And at the center of it all was Raven. Even in chains, she exuded power. Her sharp eyes followed Marcus as he took the stand, her calm expression betraying none of the fury I knew was boiling beneath the surface. Marcus's testimony was clear and damning. He detailed the transactions, the communications, and the threats that had tied him to Raven's operation. Every word was like a nail in her coffin, and I could see the cracks forming in her composed exterior. "You're lying!" Raven finally spat, her voice cutting through the courtroom like a knife. "You think you can walk away from this unscathed? You're a fool if you believe that." The judge silenced her, but her words hung in the air like a dark promise. As Marcus stepped down from the stand, I felt a brief sense of relief. It was almost over. But as we left the courthouse, flanked by officers, a commotion erupted outside. A black SUV screeched to a halt at the curb, and before anyone could react, masked men jumped out, guns drawn. "Get down!" someone shouted, but it was too late. The men opened fire, the deafening cracks of gunshots echoing through the air. Marcus grabbed my arm, pulling me behind a barricade as chaos unfolded around us. Officers returned fire, and the scene descended into pandemonium. Through the chaos, I saw her. Raven. She wasn't supposed to be there, but there she was, sitting in the back of the SUV, her eyes locked on mine. She smiled, cold, calculated, victorious, before the SUV sped away, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. By the time the dust settled, the masked men had been subdued, and several officers were injured but alive. Marcus and I were rushed to safety, but the message was clear. Raven wasn't just a puppet master. She was a ghost, capable of slipping through the cracks and orchestrating chaos from the shadows. Later that night, Eleanor called. Her voice was steady but laced with frustration. "We've confirmed it," she said. "Raven's escape was planned months ago. She had allies on the inside. She's gone underground." My stomach churned. "So what now?" "We keep fighting," Elena said. "But you need to disappear. She won't stop until she gets what she wants." With Elena's help, Marcus, Sophia, and I entered witness protection. Our old lives were erased, New names, new identities, new beginnings. It felt like a death of sorts, leaving behind everything we had known. For weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that Raven was watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I knew her well enough to understand that this wasn't the end. One night, as I unpacked boxes in our new home, I found a letter tucked inside one of them. My heart sank as I recognized the handwriting. It was from Raven. "You can change your name, your home, your life, but you can't hide forever. We're not done, my dear, not even close." I dropped the letter, my hands trembling. Raven had found us. As I sat there, staring at the letter, I realized that this wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a war. A war against a woman who thrived on control, chaos, and revenge. But this time, I wasn't going to run. Raven thought she could haunt me forever, but she underestimated one thing. I wasn't just her victim, I was her equal, and I was ready to fight.